There is a bridge in China so high that the valley beneath it disappears into cloud, and the cars crossing it seem to float in open sky. Not because there was no easier way to connect the two mountains, but because the engineers chose the hardest route on purpose. Here, things most countries would call impossible trains that outrun highway traffic bridges, hung across canyons deeper than skyscrapers are tall, entire cities powered by nothing but wind and sunlight are treated as simply routine. The most puzzling thing is not that these projects can be built. It is why, when there is always an easier path to take, China keeps choosing the harder one. Perhaps it is because progress was never meant to be convenient. Sometimes a nation builds the impossible simply to prove that it can. The sound of water at the bottom of the canyon can barely reach the bridge deck, and on the Huajiang Grand Canyon Bridge, the clearest sound is often the wind moving through the cables. That distance is about 2,051 feet, enough for a falling object to take nearly 11 seconds to reach the bottom of the canyon. Above that enormous gap, two main towers, about 1,089 feet tall, and a massive cable system support a main span nearly 4,659 feet long across the canyon. To keep those huge cables stable on fractured karst terrain, engineers had to dig deep into the mountainsides and build massive concrete anchor blocks. Geology is not the only challenge, because strong winds also move through the canyon, so the steel deck uses aerodynamic openings that allow air to pass through the structure. Thanks to the entire system, a journey that once took about 70 minutes around the mountains now takes only about 1 minute across the canyon. What keeps Baowei Bridge standing when its lower supports almost disappear into the mist, making the curved roofs and red columns look as if they are floating above the river? Behind this historic appearance is a modern load-bearing core, while the tiled roofs and red columns above follow traditional dugong-style design along the bridge corridor. Tens of thousands of clay roof tiles add hundreds of tons of extra weight, forcing the beams below to be reinforced to support the entire upper structure. That weight is transferred into the foundation, where piles pass through soft mud into stronger rock to resist currents that can scour the riverbed by about 13 to 16 feet during floods. On the bridge, the covered corridor can also compress the airflow, making wind speeds inside about 30% stronger than in the surrounding areas. At night, thousands of lights reflect across the water, making the curved roofs and red columns appear to continue beneath the bridge. While traveling above the sea, the Shenzhen-Zhongshan link suddenly sends the highway underwater, creating a journey of nearly 15 miles that takes only about 30 minutes. To withstand level 17 typhoons, the entire system uses large expansion joints that allow the structure to move slightly while remaining stable. The bridge must also leave enough space for ships with nearly 299 feet of clearance, allowing large container vessels to pass underneath. From there, the route reaches two artificial islands at the tunnel entrance, shaped to reduce the impact of water currents and protect the transition beneath the sea. The tunnel lies about 131 feet below the surface and consists of 32 massive sections, each weighing up to about 80,000 tons, joined together under enormous water pressure. Inside the tunnel, fire is another major risk, so the walls are protected with fire-resistant material that can withstand temperatures of about 2,192 degrees Fahrenheit. A curved concrete wall is pressed between two mountain slopes at Baihetan, where the rock on both sides becomes part of the support holding back the huge body of water behind the dam. To keep the concrete from cracking as it heated during construction, more than 6,214 miles of cold water pipes were placed deep inside the structure to cool it for months. Beyond the heat problem, the dam also stands in a complex seismic zone, so its design had to account for ground movement and geological pressure. Inside are 16 generating units with rotors weighing about 2,205 tons, yet they operate with very little vibration. When all 6 flood outlets open, huge streams of water shoot from the dam and fall hundreds of feet toward the river below. The powerful discharge creates a thick cloud of white mist across the canyon floor, making the entire area below almost disappear in the spray. A drop of nearly 1,854 feet opens directly beneath the wheels on the Beipanjiang Bridge as the roadway crosses a huge, V-shaped canyon with almost vertical limestone walls. Over millions of years, flowing water carved the limestone into a canyon so deep that the entire Empire State Building could fit beneath the bridge deck. Strong winds are forced through the narrow canyon, so the structure must be designed to limit movement and resonance as weather conditions change. The main span stretches about 2,362 feet across the canyon without a support pier in the middle, held by 112 pairs of high-strength steel cables. To handle these huge pulling forces, the tallest bridge tower rises about 883 feet and is anchored deep into the mountainside. Before the cable system could be installed, the terrain was so steep that the construction team had to use a drone to carry the first pilot line across the canyon. Thousands of turbine blades spin across the horizon at the Juquan Wind Power Base, turning the desert into a vast network of machines stretching beyond sight. The funnel-shaped terrain pushes wind through the area, keeping average speeds near 19 miles per hour for much of the year. With temperature differences reaching about 54 degrees Fahrenheit and frequent blowing sand, the blades, nearly 197 feet long, need materials that resist wear. On the ground, special hydraulic trucks can raise the blades to angles of about 60 degrees to pass through narrow mountain roads. A nacelle weighing about 110 tons must be lifted to the top of a tower about 328 feet high in strong winds with high precision. From the desert, 800 kilovolt ultra-high voltage transmission lines stretch for thousands of miles to carry the electricity to distant areas where it is needed. Twisting a full 120 degrees from its base to the top Shanghai Tower uses its aerodynamic shape to reduce wind loads by about 24%. To support about 850,000 tons on soft-ground, engineers had to drive 980 piles about 282 feet deep into stronger soil below. Near the top of the tower, a tuned mass damper weighing about 1,000 tons moves in the opposite direction of the building to reduce swaying from wind and earthquakes. Inside the tower, high-speed elevators carry passengers to the observation level in about 55 seconds, reaching a top speed of nearly 46 miles per hour. At a height of nearly 1,969 feet, 270 vertical wind turbines use strong winds to generate electricity for the exterior lighting system. On foggy days, the upper floors rise above the white clouds, making the city below almost disappear from view. The steel frame of Canton Tower twists upward and narrows to only about 98 feet, creating a distinctive waist that has earned the tower its supermodel nickname on the skyline. Its uneven twisting shape creates about 10,000 connection points with different angles and sizes, requiring extremely precise welding and assembly. To support the entire structure, on soft ground near the river, 24 concrete piles were drilled about 131 feet down into solid rock below. The open steel shell allows wind to pass through the structure, while large water-filled damping systems help reduce movement in the tower. At the top, an antenna about 492 feet tall also forms part of the lightning protection system, carrying electrical current safely into the ground through cables inside the tower. At night, about 7,000 LED lights illuminate the entire structure, while the skydrop gives visitors an experience more than 1,312 feet above the ground. The air is so thin that even machines lose power, yet the Keller Solar Power Station still spreads more than 2 million solar panels across a high plateau covered by a sea of clouds. In a single day, temperatures can change by about 54 degrees Fahrenheit and fall to around -22 degrees Fahrenheit on winter nights, forcing materials to expand and contract again and again. To withstand winds above 62 miles per hour, about 527,000 steel supports had to be drilled into hard rock and frozen ground to keep the entire system stable. Construction also required long lines of trucks to carry materials along steep and slippery mountain roads to reach the high-altitude site. These supports hold about 2 million solar panels, creating an array with an area equal to roughly 2,000 soccer fields. Once completed, the entire system operates almost silently, with little more than the sound of wind passing through the rows of metal supports across the plateau. At the middle of the Jiaozhou Bay Bridge, land almost disappears from view, leaving the 25-mile roadway stretching across the sea like a highway with no visible end. Along that same long route, engineers also built a T-shaped interchange entirely over the water, allowing traffic lanes to split in different directions above the sea. Below the surface, more than 5,000 foundation piles pass through weak mud and sand before anchoring deep into bedrock to keep the entire bridge stable. The structure uses about 3,008,000 cubic yards of high-strength concrete to reduce saltwater corrosion and extend its design life to 100 years. The bridge was also designed to withstand a magnitude 8 earthquake and a direct impact from a cargo ship weighing about 331,000 tons. In winter, when ice forms around thousands of bridge supports, optical sensors still monitor vibration and wind to help control traffic safety. Ocean Flower Island looks like 3 flowers floating on the sea, but each petal was actually built from hundreds of millions of tons of sand pumped up from the ocean floor. To create this artificial land, dredging ships had to work continuously offshore, heavily affecting the natural coral environment around the area. As concrete glass and roads cover the surface, the island holds heat longer than the surrounding sea, especially on hot summer days. Beneath the large avenues and squares, underground levels and parking areas must be reinforced against water leaks to limit seawater from seeping in. Unlike natural beaches shaped by water flow, many beaches on the island are formed into square sections sitting between breakwaters that clearly show human design. At night, color-changing LED systems light up the entire complex, making it look like a floating city glowing on the dark sea. The triangular glass panels of Shenzhen Universiade Sports Center come together like a giant crystal, making the whole sports complex look as if it was cut from bright stone. The shell has many open gaps that let wind pass through the structure, making the inside about 4 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit cooler and helping reduce the impact of UV rays. The ecological water area outside collects rainwater and reflects the sharp glass surfaces as the complex faces strong coastal winds. Deep foundations anchor into firm ground to support the steel roof, which weighs about 19,800 tons and extends nearly 197 feet, while limiting the need for support columns below. At midday, sunlight passes through the steel frame and creates broken shadows across the field, making the crystal-like shell visible even from inside the structure. On the sloped glass surfaces, more than 100 feet above the ground, window cleaners must work with hanging ropes because many areas are too steep and complex for automatic robots. China Art Museum places a roof nearly 643 feet wide on a base only about 108 feet across, creating an upside-down pyramid that looks as if it should not be able to stand. Strong winds strike the wide upper section like a giant sail, but aerodynamic openings allow air to pass through instead of forcing all that pressure against the structure. Inside, more than 25,000 tons of steel locked together using the ancient dugong principle, creating large exhibition halls with almost no columns in the middle. The extended roof also works like a giant heat shield, reducing direct sunlight and keeping the area below cooler without requiring extra energy. A 348-foot escalator carries visitors up nearly 161 feet before they gradually make their way down through the exhibition levels. From a distance, the dark central core almost disappears beneath the shadow of the roof, making the entire red structure seem to float in mid-air above an impossibly narrow base. Walking from one side of Chongqing Guotai Arts Center to the other, the elevation changes by nearly 131 feet, revealing how deeply the entire structure is built into a steep mountainside. That steep slope forces the large steel sections extending from the building to be secured by deep foundations anchored into the rock below, helping resist the load, pulling the structure downhill. Above them, thousands of steel beams inspired by ancient Daogong construction lock together and share the load without depending completely on large load-bearing walls. Standing beneath the dense steel frame, people look tiny among beams stretching in many directions, making the true scale of the building clear in a single view. From above, the red beams spread around the building, making it look like a sharp-edged metal mass wedged between the surrounding high-rises. The top of Ping An Finance Center often disappears into the clouds, but raising a tower nearly 1,965 feet high begins with two major challenges: wind and the foundation. At this height, 8 V-shaped columns help reduce the wind load on the tower by about 35%. To support a weight of roughly 500,000 US tons, deep foundation piles pass through soft ground and transfer the load into stronger rock layers below. Around the structure, about 1,700 tons of stainless steel help improve resistance to corrosion in the humid and salty coastal environment. The original design also included an antenna that would have raised the tower to about 2,165 feet, but it was later removed because of aviation safety requirements. During construction, concrete had to be pumped to nearly 2,000 feet using a high-pressure system requiring careful control of pressure inside the pipes. A giant red teapot, about 242 feet tall, rises among green tea fields, but inside, the Meitan Tea Museum is actually an entire building. Recognized by Guinness as the world's largest teapot in 2010, the structure has more than 1 million cubic feet of interior volume, equal to about 113 million cups of tea if it were filled with water. To keep this massive concrete structure stable on the hillside, deep foundation piles pass through the upper soil and transfer the load into stronger rock layers below. Outside steel and concrete are shaped into smooth, continuous curves like fired clay copying the form of a traditional Zaisha teapot. Across the outer shell windows are hidden inside decorative patterns, making it difficult to see from a distance that this is actually a multi-story building. The most difficult feature is the spout, where the curved structure extends away from the main body without direct support columns beneath it, and also forms a viewing area. From above, the Shenzhen Science and Technology Museum appears like a flowing mass of silver-white metal with an outer shell that has almost no clear right angles or straight lines. This curved form is designed to let strong winds move around the building, instead of forcing pressure directly against flat exterior surfaces. Covering more than 1.3 million square feet, the building also uses natural ventilation to bring cooler air inside and push warm air upward toward the roof. Across the metal exterior, many light openings are arranged in mathematical patterns, bringing natural light inside while limiting ultraviolet radiation. Below the building, thousands of friction piles extend deep through soft ground to transfer the load into more stable layers beneath. Above this foundation, specially calculated curved steel beams form a structural frame that matches the continuous shape of the entire building. The sea repeatedly retreats and returns around the Jiangsu Rudong offshore wind farm, forcing hundreds of turbines to stand on a tidal flat that constantly shifts between deeper water and soft mud. To reduce seabed erosion, hollow steel piles about 26 feet wide and weighing more than 1,100 tons are driven deep into the mud with massive hydraulic hammers. When powerful storms arrive, automatic control systems can adjust the blade angles to face the wind and reduce the force on the entire structure. With a swept area larger than 3 soccer fields, the turbines send electricity to an offshore substation before it travels through underwater cables to the mainland. Across the open water, the turbines continue turning steadily in the wind and the waves, while the entire power system adds very little extra noise. What lies beneath the foundation of Yuntian Palace, often called the Portal of the South, that made drilling so difficult during construction? Instead of removing it, the unusual rock below was used as a natural base for the 354-foot structure carrying tens of thousands of tons of materials above. The core combines modern reinforced concrete with traditional wooden joint systems, helping the entire building remain more stable during ground movement. Around this core is a striking two-part structure with a solid concrete lower section and traditional palace roofs rising above it. Inside stands a Maitreya Buddha, nearly 98 feet tall, weighing about 62 tons, and assembled from more than 1,000 brass plates. Most remarkably, the statue was built first, and the palace was then constructed around it until the massive figure was fully enclosed inside. The ground at Shenzhen Bay Cultural Plaza seems to rise into massive white forms where roofs, walls, and grass almost lose their clear boundaries. These rounded roofs allow coastal winds to move smoothly across the surface, while the underground sections help reduce the amount of heat entering the interior. The seamless white concrete and the lack of clear floors or windows make it difficult to judge the true size of the building from a distance. As visitors continue down into the sunken plaza, the lower terrain and grass-covered mounds act as natural sound barriers, noticeably reducing the noise from the city outside. The Shanghai Maglev train travels at nearly 268 miles per hour, while barely touching the guideway, floating less than 1 inch above it. At that speed, air becomes the main source of resistance, so the front of the train is shaped to reduce pressure as it moves along the guideway. To create this motion, the main driving system is built into the route itself, where electromagnetic coils are powered section by section to pull the train forward. When two trains pass each other in opposite directions, their relative speed can reach about 536 miles per hour, creating a major pressure change in only a few seconds. Even on curves, the guideway must tilt by up to 12 degrees and use a wide turning radius to keep the train stable while changing direction. full journey takes just over 7 minutes, while the LED speed display inside keeps passengers watching as the number approaches 268 miles per hour. The V-shaped top of Suzhou IFS rises 1,476 feet, like a carp tail breaking out of the water, making the whole tower look like a glass form twisting into the sky. To hold the 92-story building on weak ground near water, engineers drilled foundation piles about 295 feet down into stronger ground below. The curved aerodynamic shell helps reduce wind pressure, while most of the weight is carried by a reinforced concrete core at the center. Behind the heat-reducing low-E glass, the pressure control system keeps air inside the elevator shafts stable and limits the stack effect at great height. High-speed elevators move at about 22 miles per hour, carrying passengers up to the higher floors in about 45 seconds. More than 1,312 feet above the ground, window cleaners must hang outside the curved glass while the city stretches far below them toward the horizon. More than 621 miles from the real coast, New Century Global Center still contains an artificial beach with waves beneath a massive glass roof, almost as if the ocean had been brought into the middle of the continent. The entire complex has about 18,300,000 square feet of floor space and rises about 328 feet high, creating an enormous architectural structure. Inside this vast complex, huge amounts of water and white sand form an artificial beach where powerful pumps continuously create waves for visitors. Directly above the beach, an LED screen nearly 492 feet long simulates daylight, sunrise, and sunset even on cloudy days. Covering the entire space is a massive curved steel roof network that creates huge open areas without dense rows of support columns in the middle. Beneath the roof are hotels, cinemas, an ice rink, and large public spaces, making the whole complex feel like a small city inside a single building. Right above moving traffic, the Bohai Eye rises as a huge hollow steel wheel, turning the cable-stayed bridge below into a support base for an entertainment structure hanging in the sky. With no central axle and a diameter of 410 feet. Strong winds can pass through the open center instead of pressing directly against the entire structure. The strangest part is that the steel frame almost stays still while 36 passenger cabins move along hidden rails inside the rim. At a height similar to a 48-story building, each cabin is still arranged like a comfortable enclosed space with air conditioning, Wi-Fi, and a wide view over the river below. At night, LED lights make the whole steel wheel glow above the dark water, making the structure look like a bright ring hanging over the bridge. Climbing nearly 80 floors without taking a single step, the Wushan Goddess escalator carries passengers about 787 feet up a very steep mountainside. The glass cover helps protect the system from rain and strong winds, while the metal parts are treated to resist corrosion in the damp fog that often covers the mountainside. The slope was too steep for tower cranes to operate. So many steel and glass sections had to be pulled up the mountainside using winches and pulley systems. The system reduced a climb of more than 1 hour to about 20 minutes, making the journey much easier. Moving at about 2 feet per second, passengers can look down into the valley, while at night, the entire escalator stands out under its lights. Xiaolangdi Dam. Costing about $5 billion, Xiaolangdi Dam is not only a hydropower dam, but a giant machine built across the Yellow River to hold back a river feared for floods and heavy sediment. Every year, this river carries about 1.8 billion tons of silt, enough to build a road about 3 feet high and 3 feet wide around the Earth 27 times. Behind the dam is a reservoir holding about 3.3 trillion gallons of water, with a weight equal to about 5 million Olympic swimming pools, creating enormous pressure that is always pushing against the foundation. Over the last 2,000 years, the Yellow River has broken its banks about 1,500 times and changed course 26 times, taking millions of lives and leaving fear behind for centuries. To hold back that violent force, the core of the dam is a giant mass of earth and rock, about 505 feet high and about 5,469 feet long, large enough to bury dozens of giant pyramids. When the floodgates burst open, dozens of thick columns of muddy water shoot high into the air and charge forward like golden dragons roaring as they tear across the sky. China Zun. Among the glass towers of Beijing, China Zun rises about 1,732 feet high like a giant ancient vessel pulled straight into the clouds. The whole project cost about $3.5 billion, and its shape comes from an old wine vessel with a wide base, a narrow middle, and a top that opens out again. But that narrow waist is not only for beauty, because the curve helps the tower cut about 20% of the wind force as it rises so high into the sky. At night, hidden LED lights inside the glass joints turn China Zun into a giant glowing crystal above the city. Tianzi Hotel. Hidden under the colossal forms of 3 Eastern deities, this accommodation machine is an ultimate rebellion, permanently breaking the definition of traditional architectural space. Despite possessing a massive concrete volume, standing 136 feet tall, the structure defies all aerodynamic principles, requiring a foundation anchored deep into the earth to resist the tearing power of hurricanes. To protect the sanctity and integrity of the statue, the facade rejects all modern glass panels. Instead, engineers used spatial algorithms to conceal hundreds of windows within the majestic robe folds and beards. The sudden appearance of 3 colorful giant entities amidst a quiet urban area creates a surreal visual shock, like a fracture between reality and the mythological world. Rising above trivial material comforts, countless travelers come here yearning to fall asleep inside the belly of the gods, hoping to absorb prosperity and absolute longevity. Even though mocked by academics as the worst aesthetic disaster on the planet, this masterpiece still stands tall as a proud manifesto of the power of faith and indigenous culture. The giant egg. Like a giant silver egg floating in a lake, the giant egg looks like a spacecraft that has just landed in the middle of an ancient city. To create that shape, builders spent 6 years making a dome about 696 feet long, covered with 18,000 titanium panels and 1,200 strong glass panels without needing support columns. Below the ground, the foundation goes about 106 feet deep equal to a 10-story building, to hold this giant structure firmly in place. Inside, the total floor area of about 1.6 million square feet can hold more than 5,000 spectators in 3 separate performance halls. To enter the theater, you must walk through an underwater glass tunnel about 262 feet long, where light passing through the lake makes it feel like an underground palace. When night falls, this $400 million building glows in the dark lake like a giant pearl of art and the future.